Hello, my name's Ben Haynes and I work for the Education Business Links team. I'm here today to talk to you about finding your work experience placement. Now, within this presentation, I'm going to give you some useful hints and tips on how to approach companies and how to go about finding and sourcing those all-important work experience placements. So before I begin, you need to start thinking about what's so good about work experience anyway? Why are you doing it? Well, the importance of work experience is it gives you an opportunity to learn about skills needed for work and understand why they're important. You might be thinking to yourself, why am I doing these courses at school at the moment? Why am I doing my English and maths? How does it apply to the real world? When you go on work experience, you'll be able to see how your maths and your English and other subjects transpose across to the real world of work. Also, on work experience, you'll be treated as an adult. When you're at school, you are treated more as a child, but on work experience, you will build up other skills such as taking your own responsibility, learning resiliency, being able to be flexible, all transferable skills that you need to take through in your working life. We'll get to those a bit later on in the presentation. Also, with work experience, it gives the opportunity to maybe get a part-time job. A lot of people have gone on to work experience and then gone on to companies to then work for them as Saturday jobs and apprenticeships afterwards. When you're on work experience, it gives you an opportunity to also gain good references from people. What employers tend to look for is it's all very well having your good grades when you come out of school and college and university, but what most employers tend to look for is what past experience you already have. You need to show evidence that you're able to apply these skills and these qualifications, and work experience gives you the opportunity to do just that. So, going on to transferable skills. What are they? Now, a lot of you do have transferable skills, but it's one of these things that you don't tend to think about on a day-to-day basis. For example, you may be a team captain in the school team. You may be a prefect. You may be supporting friends if they're stuck with their work. You may be supporting family members as well. So take a look at some of these transferable skills, or otherwise known as employability skills: spoken communication, teamwork, self-management, using numbers, business net enterprise, problem solving, customer care, written communication, and positive attitude. Start thinking about these transferable skills and how they apply to you and which ones you already have. Which one of these do you think is the most important? Which one do you think employers look for the most? I mean, they're all useful, but which one do you think an employer looks for? I'll give you a couple of moments to think about it. It's actually positive attitude. It does not matter if you have good spoken communication, good teamwork, good self-management, good presentation skills, for example. If you do not have a positive attitude, all the rest of these skills become null and void. So moving on, other good things about work experience are it helps you see the relevancy of subjects, as I mentioned before, but also it gives you the opportunity to gain confidence and maturity. When you come back off work experience, you will be very different from when you went out. So it's all very well and good, but how do you go about finding that placement? What do you need to do? What's the first step that you need to do? Well, the first thing that you need to do is decide what you want to do. You may already have a particular career interest. You may already be wanting to work within a particular working environment. You may be wanting to do something completely different or new. So start thinking about what it is that you want to do. It is not your parents' work experience, it is not the school's work experience, it is yours. So start thinking about what skills you have and start thinking about what it is that you want to do. Now, for those of you who are completely unsure, and it's like a shot in the dark here, you can actually use what we call psychometric tests. Now, a quick search on Google will bring up things like Fast Tomato or Kudos, or there's the UCAS Progress site that you can go on to, and I'll ask you a number of questions of what type of person you are. And from that, it will give you some career families that you may fall into. Now, probably about 99% of the careers that come up on there will be of no interest to you whatsoever. But maybe 1% of them you'll think, I've never thought about that before. Let's research those a bit further. And that's another key point to think about. Researching. Work experience can be interesting and varied. So there's all different types of work experience. You can work within engineering, you could go and work within the arts, you can go and work on a farm. It is not just all about filing and making the tea. However, those skills are also important, and we'll come to those in a moment. But you need to be realistic. I have no doubt that some of you may go on to become CEO, the Prime Minister, may end up playing for the national team or go on to be a superstar. But you need to start somewhere. And on work experience, you're not going to be deep sea diving, up on a catwalk, or a film star on a film set. You need to think about your starting points and actually, can you get to that placement as well? As I mentioned, it's not all about making tea and filing. However, if whilst you're on work experience you're asked to make the tea or coffee, that is not a case of workplace bullying. It's transferable skills. Okay, we all have to do these jobs. I still make the tea for people as well, and I still do admin-based jobs as well. It is useful transferable skills. There are limits, though, to what you are allowed to do. This is normally because of health and safety restrictions due to your age, inexperience, and lack of formal qualifications. So, for example, you're not going to be allowed to cut hair if you go and work in a hairdresser's. And I put it like this, you wouldn't want me to cut your hair. That's because it takes lots of training to be able to get to a point where you are able to cut people's hair. So again, going back to being realistic, operating machinery. Certain machinery you are allowed to use and certain machinery you are not allowed to use. For example, if you're going to go and use a steel press, depending upon the equipment, you may be allowed to use that. That's where I come in. I go and assess the company's equipment and decide upon what students are allowed to use and what they aren't allowed to use. You aren't going to be allowed to use a chainsaw, for example, and you certainly won't be allowed to go and drive any vehicles. Animal handling is restricted, for example. Now, you may be dealing with dogs within a dog groomers. You may be dealing with sheep if you're going to go and work on a farm, but you're not going to be going working with the bull, and you're not going to be going to go and work with venomous snakes if you're going to go work in a zoo. Work hours. On work experience, you could be expected to work an 8-hour day. So make sure that you're getting your sleep in, because you will be tired at the end of work experience. It's very different from school. Within school, you have your lessons and you have your breaks. You can be expected to work up to 4.5 hours solid before having a break. So as I say, make sure that you're getting your sleep in. Depending upon the type of work experience that you're doing as well, you may be expected to go and work evenings. For example, if you're going to go and work in a restaurant, most of the work tends to be in the evenings. You may be expected to work early mornings. If you go to work on a farm, for example, it's early mornings. But if you're going to go and work with someone in construction field, if they're coming to collect you, then obviously they may be picking you up earlier to be able to transport you to where they're going to go and work. So make sure that you are up in time, because they're not going to wait around for you. And also take into account that travel time does not count as your working hours, because you're not going to be driving the vehicle. Okay, your working hours are from when you turn up at the place of work and you start doing the work until the time that you stop doing the work. You may be required to wear personal protective equipment. So think about the dangers where you may be working. You may be requested to purchase your own safety boots, for example, and overalls. Most companies will provide things like the masks and gloves, ear defenders, eye protection, if it's a requirement. But safety boots can be quite expensive to buy for every single student on work experience. So double check whether you need them or not before you go out on placement. Because if you don't have them on the day that you turn up, you won't be doing the work experience. Again, going back to being realistic, you can travel to different places for work experience. You don't have to just do your work experience within your local area. We have had students go and do work experience within Manchester, Liverpool, London, all over the country. but you need to be realistic. Can you actually get to this placement? Have you got support in being able to travel there and back? Have you got somewhere to stay? And then you need to put your plan into action. So, you've researched a few career families. You've decided that you want to do, let's say, for example, engineering. Then what you need to do is start researching about engineering. And then you start looking at specific types of engineering. So, for example, you want to do chemical engineering. So then what you start doing is researching the local companies, the local labour market that do chemical engineering. So you pick Smart Water, for example, and then you need to contact that company. What's your next step? Well, you need to start looking now. And why is that? Well, there's lots of competition for placements. You're not the only school that are going out on work experience. There are lots of other students who tend to go out around the same time as you do. And there are more students than there are placements. So you need to make yourself stand out. Think about what transferable skills, as I said earlier, and start thinking about why it is you want to do that type of placement. And what you also need to do is research the company that you are interested in, show an interest in them. Before you go on work experience, all of your placements need to be approved by ourselves at Education Business Links. We need a minimum of 3 months notice before you go on work experience. If you find your placement after those 3 months, it's unlikely that the placement will be going ahead if it isn't already on our database, because we need to go out and check that the place is safe. So use every contact that you have to find the placement. Talk to parents and carers. Talk to teachers and support staff. What type of work do you think would be best suited for you? Do they know of any companies? Do they have any friends who already work in certain companies that might have opportunities for you? Remember though as well, through all of this, that it is your work experience, not your parents and not the schools. So just go to them to get some ideas. Other ways of getting inspiration are to take a look in local business directories, look in the local paper, you can do an internet search, and a really good one is to look at last year's students because they've already been through this process before, and they may be able to give you some useful hints and tips, and things that worked and things that didn't work. We do have a work experience database, and on here we have 3,500 companies that have taken on students in the past. You can filter this by different types of career family. You can filter it by postcode, so for your local area as well, and just gives you a good starting point of people to contact. Well, what do you need to do next? Well, you need to contact the company. You need to contact the company by phone, by letter, by email, and I would recommend that you contact several different companies. What the company will need to know is what school you're from, the dates of your work experience, the contact name and number of your school work experience tutor, and also if you have any disabilities. If you do have a disability or illness, you need to tell the company of this. It's not going to stop you from getting that work experience placement. It's just so that they know what support they can put in place for you. Also, you need to tell them who you are. I can't stress that enough. We've had students in the past who get very nervous when they phone up a company and they just say, "Do you do work experience?" And the company says, "Yes, we do." And the student says, "Great, thanks," and then hangs up the phone. To avoid those nerves, a good idea is to write up a script beforehand. So research the company, think about what questions you're going to ask them, what department you'd like to work within, what skills you have. The things that your staff and tutors need to know about your placement are, we need to know the correct name of the business or organisation, the correct contact name, the correct address and postcode, correct telephone numbers, the tasks that you're going to be doing, and do they have employer's liability insurance? That is essential. Your company must have employer's liability insurance in order to take you on work experience. Without that, work experience cannot go ahead. And the reason why we need these correct details here is, as I said, we go out and do the checks on those placements. If you give us the wrong postcode, we end up at the wrong place. If we end up at the wrong place, that's time and money wasted. And it also means there's a delay in us being able to get out to the correct place to do the check, and therefore it could then mean that your placement doesn't go ahead. Also, throughout the whole process, if a company says to you, yep, they're happy to take you on for work experience, the journey doesn't end there. You need to keep in contact with that company because things change. Make sure that your placement is definitely confirmed. Staff members change and the economy changes. So take into account that as well. Keep in contact. And it's also just good common courtesy to keep in contact with that company. It shows them that you're interested. So, arrange a pre-placement interview before you go on your work experience. Most companies will offer you an interview, but if a company doesn't, there's no harm in asking for one. It is useful to have an interview because it gives you transferable skills for later on in life. Most companies will ask you to have an interview in order to get that job. But also, from purpose of work experience, it's good to have that interview because companies will then know which department to put you in, what is going to suit you best. Again, when you go out for your interview, you need to start thinking about what transferable skills you've got. So prepare yourself for the interview. So, here are some useful things to think about should you have an interview. A lot of these should be pretty obvious anyway. Having correct body posture, having good hygiene, being smart and presentable, and obviously being on time. But also remember to research the company before you go for your interview. Now, you should have been researching the company anyway in order to have found the placement, but it's also a good idea to research that company so you'll have some questions ready before you go in. So good questions, for example, things like what department you want to work in, what skills you want to develop. Bad questions are things like what time's my break, am I going to get paid, and when does my work experience end? First impressions count, regardless of whether you're having an interview or not. How you present yourself on the first day determines how well you're going to do on your work experience. Your interview doesn't start when you go into the interview room. Your interview starts as soon as you make contact. So be that via email or over the phone, or if you go in and speak to the receptionist. So make sure that you have that positive attitude when you first meet the company. Talking of being assessed, one thing to be aware of is digital dirt. And what I mean by digital dirt is it's your social media presence. Think about what you post at the moment on social media. And why is this important? It's because companies now do a quick, simple Google search of your name and they research people's social media presence before they go out on not just work experience, before they employ people as well. So, is your social media presence painting you in a positive light? Start thinking about that before you go out on work experience. Don't forget to talk to teachers and keep them informed of how you're doing throughout the whole process. So, for example, if your placement falls through because there's a change of staff within the company, you need to inform your teacher of this so that they can assist you in sourcing another placement. So, in summary, think about what you want to do and your current skills. There are various online tests you can do to do this, or you can speak to friends and family. Research the career that you're interested in. Take a look online at the careers that you're interested in and what skills and qualifications you require. Use every contact that you have. Family and friends may already know of some companies that you could approach. Research the local labour market for the field that you're interested in. If you're interested in a particular type of career, take a look at what's available to you locally. Once you know which company to approach, research that company. Take a look on their website so you're showing an interest in them. Write up a script of what you're going to say to the company before you contact them, and list your current transferable skills and what questions you're going to ask. When you contact the company, give them as much information as possible. Once you have your placement confirmed, pass the information on to your tutor through your work experience account, giving as much information as possible about that placement. Keep in contact with the company throughout the whole process. Therefore, if any changes occur, you'll be aware of them. And it also shows that the company that you're interested. Try to arrange a pre-placement interview if one hasn't already been offered. Keep your tutor and company informed of any changes to your situation. It's just common courtesy, but also if you're going to be ill, you need to let the company know as soon as possible. And finally, don't leave it too late to get organised. Remember, you're in competition with other schools and your friends. But most importantly, don't forget to have fun. As I said at the beginning, work experience is very different from school. You will be treated as an adult, and you will find that when you come back from work experience, you'll be very different from when you originally went out. So, most importantly, have fun, enjoy it. It is an experience. Thank you very much for your time.